So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to this webinar. I'm Nathan Crawford-Condie, the Client Solutions Manager for Avec based in Melbourne. A lot of you may know me already. I've been with Talent for over 8 years. Joining me today will be Dennis Grant, the Managing Director for Avec, and Colin Hammond, the founder of ScopeMaster, joining us from Henley-on-Thames in the UK. So welcome all talent clients, contractors, and our industry friends. We're delighted to bring you this webinar today about automation and AI tools for agile project delivery. And thank you for being a part of our business with a free trial of this tool as well. In the next hour, we're going to provide you with some of the latest thinking around using AI to drive better requirements analysis for agile projects. And this is really part of a global transformation we're seeing towards data-driven software algorithms being used to replace human-based analysis and manual operations. One of the big impacts we've seen of COVID on business in the past 8 to 9 months has been a real acceleration in the adoption of AI tools and automation to save costs and achieve competitive advantage. So, in a first for the Australian market, we're very pleased to demonstrate the award-winning AI tool and delivery enabler, ScopeMaster. I'll now hand over to Dennis, who will give you an overview of Avec, and Colin, the founder of ScopeMaster, who will explain a bit about how it works. And then Dennis is going to give you all a live demonstration, and we'll have time towards the end of the hour for some Q&A as well. So, like I mentioned earlier, please feel very welcome to say anything in the chat. Ask us any questions. We'll do our best to address them throughout or save them towards the end. Hope you enjoy and speak to you soon. And without further ado, here's Dennis. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate that. So, guys, what we'll take you through is a quick intro to Avec. We'll then jump over to Colin, who's joining us from the UK. Who will take us through a couple of the basics around ScopeMaster. I'll then do a live demo, and then we'll do a little bit on the exclusive offer and some questions and answers. It's great to have a whole lot of talent people joining us today. Sorry, the screen is just delayed a bit. Sorry about that. So it's great to have a whole bunch of talent people joining us, as well as Avec people, as well as some clients. A little bit about Avec. Most of you know Talent, which is a large resourcing company, but Avec is the consulting arm of Talent. We have about 105 odd consultants who are on our books and who drive outcomes-based deliverables for our clients. We were really born out of the need for kind of a cost-effective alternative to the high end of town. So if you look back in 2007 when we were first established, Richard Earl, our chairman and founder, saw a gap in the market in terms of the consulting space, and really saw that the consulting space was dominated by two ends of the market, either the high end of town, which was costly and fairly inflexible, or the low end of town that really battled to scale and battled to deliver, in terms of scale. So we as Avec look to try and blend capacity from traditional resourcing companies with capability from traditional consulting companies and deliver that through effective outcomes. If you look at our simple model, Avec is very much based on 3 or 4 different areas. One is the engagement level, and that's where we move out of the traditional talent, time, and materials contract towards more outcomes-based statement of work stuff at risk. We have a very robust management framework, which we call agile-orientated framework, which really drives and delivers everything that we as an organization do and ensures that predictable outcome and that a predictable delivery, that all our clients are looking for. The real game changers for us from an Avec perspective is our enablers level, as well as our leverage level. And what an enabler is it's a delivery enabler that's either people, process, systems, or practice that drives more efficient and better outcomes and better delivery. And if you have a look at this, we have a whole host of different enablers that are available to our clients and to our consultants to use. one of them being ScopeMaster, and that's what we'll dive into today. And then finally, we have arguably the biggest virtual bench in Australia. If we look at talent from a group perspective, we payroll about 3,200 odd people every week. And what we're able to do is if we aren't able to deliver based on the 105 Avec consultants, we are able to leverage and pull talent out of talent through that virtual bench for us. So that's a little bit about Avec. If you're interested in finding out more than happy to have a discussion with you. So please get in contact with us if required. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Colin, who's the founder of ScopeMaster. Like I say, very pleased to have him joining us from the UK. I think two things that stand out in terms of my project management career. One is planning is key. If you look at most theory, it'll tell you that spend 5% more in planning, you save between 35 and 50% at the end of any initiative or project. And the second thing is people's ability to influence early on in projects is significant and kind of lapses over time. So if you're getting involved down here where the poor developer has got something wrong based on the wrong user story, chances are you have little or no influence. Get it right up front, and chances are you can make a significant improvement to that. So without further ado, over to Colin, who will spend the next 10 minutes or so just taking you through ScopeMaster.
Great. Can you hear me? Thanks very much, Dennis. And thank you all for your time and for listening today. So it's a real pleasure to be able to work with Avec to get the word out really of what we've achieved here in creating a tool to analyze user stories. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes a little bit about the background of the tool and some of the principles behind why we think it's a game changer, and we've evidenced that a few times now. So I've been in IT projects for about 34 years, and I'm always learning. And I think we should recognize that actually we are always learning. And about 10 years ago, I was introduced to the idea of functional sizing, and the ability to apply numbers to software projects, which I didn't realize was a practical thing to do until it was demonstrated to me by somebody who'd been doing it for quite a while. So I'm going to be jumping between two ideas that when you perform them early on in a software project's life cycle, they can make a profound difference. And they are sizing and quality. So mostly we write our requirements as user stories, and sometimes we write the user stories as we go along nowadays. But it's worth remembering that it is important to get those user stories right, and to sort of reinforce what Dennis was saying a few minutes ago. A little bit extra time and money and effort spent early on can bring profound benefits. Now, we've used the tool to analyze the text of user stories. We've analyzed over 100,000 now in 4 different languages, and we're finding some consistent patterns. One of which is the average size of a user story is about 12 words, and on average, and you shouldn't use this number for estimation purposes, but it's a good order of magnitude, is that every word of a user story ends up being about 125 coding words or tokens. So that means if you get a word wrong the amount of time you spent on a word in your user stories, do you really do justice to it, given that it's going to be amplified 125-fold when it comes to coding? Now, that's not always the case, but it's worth bearing in mind that there's a huge leverage there. So I mentioned I'm going to jump between sizing and quality. It's quality of requirements, which actually lead to an awful lot of problems on projects. And I'm no doubt in your experiences, you'll have seen these, in that poor requirements can lead to quite disastrous results if those requirements problems are not found until production. Now, these numbers here, this slide here is based on a certain 1,000 function point size of project, which is based on analysis that's been gathered over many years of studying projects by Capers-Jones, who's written many books on the subject of software metrics. And the order of magnitude is that most of the a large proportion of the defects that we find in production actually come from the requirements themselves. Now, most of the testing that we do is about to make sure that the code matches the requirements. But if the requirements themselves are wrong, what we're doing is testing the wrong thing. And so what ScopeMaster does by analyzing the requirements helps you drive quality earlier. Now, of that 16.9, or often it's as much as 20% of the defects, the total defects you would find in production, ScopeMaster can help you find about half of them. So it doesn't find all of the problems, but it will help you find and fix about half of them. But that has a knock-on positive effect in reducing the propensity to incur bad defects. That's software defects that when you fix them, you expose them, you create another defect. And documentation-based defects. So ScopeMaster, by analyzing your requirements, helps you write better documents as well. So it has quite a profound impact on the volume of defects you would otherwise find in production. Now, the notion of shift left testing, which is sort of test early to save time, really makes sense, but it's not a new one. And this slide, which we call the Spinnaker Chart, has been out for 20, 30 years. And it basically says if you find a defect in the phase in which it was created, then it's a lot cheaper to fix. Now, this diagram was originally created when all software projects were done through waterfall, or most software projects were done through waterfall. But if you consider that a typical sprint is actually a microcosm of this, that you actually look at the user story, then you do some architecture, then you do some design, and then you do some construction, and that may be compressed into a matter of days or even hours or minutes. That's the sequence in which you do the discussion and the thinking. And if you end up with poor user stories going into your sprints, you're going to end up burning time and doing a lot of rework. So it's really good. It's really valuable to catch them early, and you can save orders of magnitude of time by doing so. Now, many of you who are into agile testing of user stories will be familiar with the INVEST mnemonic. So about what are the quality attributes of good user stories. We think that's not quite complete enough for our liking. And these are, unfortunately, there isn't a nice mnemonic for these 10, but these are our 10 favorite attributes for what makes up a good user story. And ScopeMaster can help you find and fix 9 out of 10 of these. Now, it won't find all the defects, but it will help you expose a fair chunk of them. So that's quite a considerable portion of the possible and probable defects that you might have either introduced or find in other people's requirements. And if you can find and fix those before you start doing design and development, then you'll be in much better shape and waste a lot less time in coding. Now, it turns out that the background of ScopeMaster is actually sizing, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But the idea of knowing the size is a really useful one, especially in larger software projects. If you know the size, then you can reduce uncertainty. But it also turns out that the process of sizing, of functional sizing, is also helpful in reducing uncertainty and improving quality. So this is the cone of uncertainty, often talked about a lot by the likes of Steve McConnell. And basically it says that the more work you do to reduce uncertainty early in your software, the more reliable your estimates will be. And as you go through that life cycle, the estimates and the reality will become one. So I mentioned sizing. There are about 10 different ways of sizing requirements, or sizing software actually, but it's the sizing of requirements that's for the software that is the most interesting, because if you know it up front, that's particularly valuable before you've written the software. Now, one of the more well-known ones is a technique called if-pug function point counting. It's been around since the 1970s. It was invented by a guy at IBM, and that is still going, and that is still quite still has some popularity. But some folks worked on that, and around about 2000, they found that it really wasn't cutting the mustard, and they came up with a very well-considered alternative, and it's really an evolution on the original idea, and it's called cosmic function points, and it's built on software. It's based on software principles, and using fundamental principles of how software works, all software works, you can derive a standard measurement of size, and it boils down to four components: entry, exit, read, and write. And just about all software consists of these four data movement types, what we call data movement types. And it doesn't matter whether your users are human or whether they're another software or a device connecting to some software. The fundamentals are the same: entry, exit, read, and write. And you can have a combination of these, or different combinations of these will make up your functional size. And it's remarkable how reliable and consistent. If you measure the functional size using this technique, it aligns extremely well to the amount of effort that it takes to build the software. Almost in every study I've seen, it's a better alignment for effort than story points, even though the story points have been measured by a team involved in the software itself. So really powerful. So a little bit about ScopeMaster. It started off as a tool for measuring size, and when I got it to work, I was quite excited about it, but that's when it turns out that quality is also an attribute of good user stories, and the tool was struggling to measure all the stories that I threw at it, and that's when it turned out to be quite a revelation that, as well as measuring size, it could expose potential defects in requirements. Now, here's a typical user story on this slide. As I want to sow that, and that's the format we commonly see, and most people like to use for describing agile requirements. Now, to measure the functional size, and to you really just need to look at the user, the subject, the verb, and the object, which is the who and the what of that user story. We don't look in detail at the why, and we don't look at the given, when, and then. Now, that doesn't mean to say those are not important things. It's just that to measure the functional size, which is really the foundation of the logic of the story, you just need to look at the user, what it is they want to do, and how they want to do it. So the who and the what is essentially it: subject, verb, and object. And so we study every single, go ahead with the next slide. We study every word of every user story and the relationship between the words, so that we can derive a functional intent, work out what the functional meaning is of the story, determine the objects and what it is that we're trying to do with those objects, and then automatically we can determine what the data movements are, and therefore the functional size. And knowing the size is extremely useful. So this user story consists of 3 functional steps. It has a functional size of 10 cosmic function points, and that's around about 10,000 US dollars. On average, it's about 10,000 US dollars to develop and test a story of 10 cosmic function points. Now, in this case, the tool took in the text with the yellow background, and everything below it was derived automatically. So that's by examining every single word, what part of speech it is, what relationship it has to its adjacent words, in order to break that down into a functional interpretation. And what you get from doing that is an unambiguous interpretation for developers to pick up and say, okay, I can work out what I need to do. Even if their first language is not English, they can work out from this breakdown below what it is they need to code and develop. So what you've seen is a sort of really the base, the fundamental foundation of what ScopeMaster does. It analyzes your stories, it checks them, it helps you, it will help you expose, and Dennis is going to show this in the demo in a second. It helps you expose where the potential defects are, gives you some guidance on how to make them better. It measures the function points. Now that's not 100% accurate. That's probably within about 10 or 15% of a manual count of function points. But actually 10% is actually pretty good for most projects. It's certainly a lot better than what happens typically, which is you can be out by orders of magnitude, as we saw from the cone of uncertainty. And then the other thing is, you'll see later, is that we automatically generate positive and negative test scenarios. And if you've got a lot of user stories, this can be particularly valuable in terms of saving time to get your baseline set of tests, the functional tests that you would need to validate whether or not you delivered those stories correctly. So you get sort of 3 benefits from one. Now, the tool can be used in many different scenarios, and this is where it might be interesting for you to consider how this might relate to what you're doing in your job at the moment or in your company. How could this tool help me? How could it be useful? So from a project delivery point of view, are we struggling with early estimates? Do we have a problem with our requirements? Are they causing lots of rework because they're not so clear? Do we want to benchmark teams? Do we need better documentation? Do we have some projects that are heading into trouble? And if they are, actually the requirements is a cracking good place to start. If the requirements are bad, you're bound to end up you're going to end up in a bad place. So if you want to know how good or bad the requirements are, you can tip them into the tool, press the button, and it will give you a quality score straight away. And there are some other things that you can do to maybe excite or engage the people that you're working with, just in terms of better knowledge and better insight about the projects that you're working on, simply through this automated analysis. So so really what the tool does is it doesn't interfere with your requirements at all. It simply provides you with assistance around insight and guidance as to how you might write them better, or how you might understand them better. And we're even able, because we understand, or because the tool works out what the subject, verb, and object is doing in functional terms, we're able to generate these use case diagrams automatically just by interpreting the text of your user stories. So never before has a tool been able to take the text of user stories that I'm aware of, take the text of user stories and draw diagrams, that are meaningful diagrams about the relationship between users and objects, which enable you to see a set of user stories holistically. And I think it's really insightful. And we've used this a number of times on projects that we've been working for, projects that we've done consultancy jobs on. And it's really quite exciting that they stimulate critical thinking about your own requirements that you thought, well, I didn't realize that. Yes, actually, that's right. That is inconsistent, and so on. So not just defects of complexity. So, you're not just seeing the complexity as you would on the left-hand side, but you can also take a user perspectives point of view on the sort of right-hand subset shown here, which would allow you to validate with a particular user representative about the completeness of our requirements. So you could take this diagram and sit down with, in this case, it's a professor, and say, Professor, this is how we think you'll be engaging with the software. Have we got all the requirements there? And so a question has just come in. Does the tool end up teaching people to write better requirement statements? And the answer is yes, it does, without a shadow of a doubt. So it's sort of something of a teaching tool as it goes. And we found that looking at the historical data on how much time does it take to find and fix a defect in the Three Amigos meeting, or in some cases an entire meeting where you sit down and discuss requirements, and that can often be as much as $200 a time for finding and fixing a requirements problem. And using the tool, you can get that down by orders of magnitude. So we hope that when you try this out in your trial, you'll be able to experience those kind of benefits too. So I shall hand back. I think I'm handing back to Dennis now. Is that right?
Correct. Thanks, Colin. I appreciate that.
Okay.
So guys, in the next few minutes, 15 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through a quick demo of ScopeMaster. I think the reason why I'm doing it is kind of we really want to show that anyone can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And the process that we'll go through is we'll create a CSV file of user stories. We'll import those into ScopeMaster. We'll then map some fields. We'll run some analysis. We'll assess what the results are telling us. We'll actually go ahead and confirm the users and the objects within the stories. We'll then look at refining the problematic stories in terms of some minor refinements, some tweaks here and there, and also in terms of some discussion points. We'll then look at the reports and do some final analysis before then jumping to the trial offer for you guys. So I'm going to jump out of that screen and go straight into ScopeMaster. Okay, so ScopeMaster is a web-based application. You can see I'm just going to simply log into ScopeMaster. And on the landing screen, it tells me a little bit about user stories and some tips around user stories. We were talking about that training intervention earlier. It also has got some incredibly good help functionality and some demos and videos on cosmic function point counting and that. I'm going to jump into the analysis side of things. And what I've done is I've landed here on my dashboard, and this is really a bunch of projects or a bunch of sets of user requirements that I'm going to go and assess. I'm going to go and create a new one just by clicking on the create button and demo to, and I'm going to give it a name and a description, and I'm going to select the type of project, and it's just going to create a repository for me of requirements that I can now go and use. I could go in here and I could add a user story one at a time by simply just typing in here. But in the interests of saving time for this demo, what I've actually done is I've gone away and I have created a very simple CSV file. You could get this from Jira or Azure DevOps or wherever you have. And I'm going to pull this particular set of user stories into the repository. So let me just jump across, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and upload that. If I click upload, I've got a few ways I can do this. Like I said, I can either sync with Jira Cloud, I could sync with DevOps, but just to make it very, very simple, I'm going to import it from CSV file. So I'm going to go and upload the CSV file, choose the file that I want. Let me just get there. There's the shopping cart file that I've got. You can see it brings through the simple user stories, and I'm going to upload those into ScopeMaster. So they're now in ScopeMaster. The next thing that I need to do is I need to map my fields. So if I click map my fields, what you'll see is it's brought through the 12 odd user stories there for me. The important thing to note is I really only require a title and the user story itself. Everything else is a way that I can slice and dice and change my user story. So I'm just going to quickly go and map this. I'm going to give that the ID map. That will be my title. That's my body. That's maybe my benefits. And that's any notes or comments that I may want. Like I said to you, you only require these two for it to run successfully. I'm then going to click the import button. And what's going to happen is those user stories are going to come into ScopeMaster. So the user stories are there now, and I'm just going to jump back to that slide that Colin showed you. So in the next few seconds, I'm going to click the button, and what's going to happen is it's going to bring the user story in. It's going to detect the independent steps. It's going to detect the objects and the intent, so the users and the objects that are impacted. It's going to determine the data movements and estimate the cosmic function point size for you. I'm telling you this just because it happens quite quickly, but you can actually follow it in the background, as it goes. So let's just jump back to ScopeMaster and we go analyze the stories, and off it goes. What you can see is it's analyzing it as we go. It's detecting certain things. It's interpreting the user stories. It's creating functional stars and looking for quality around those user stories that we've got. And within a couple of seconds, it should be done and dusted. And there it is. We're now complete. So if I click complete, what you'll see is it's listing all my user stories down the side there. It's saying I've got 12 of them. It's giving me a cosmic function point. It's suggesting certain users, certain objects. It's telling me from a quality perspective, any that may be ambiguous or missing or duplicated. And it's giving me a fairly low score at the moment. So it's suggesting that I do need some help. If you look down the left-hand side here, these are all your user stories, the individual ones. The little circle there indicates the size of it, and the number inside that indicates the cosmic function point size. And what you can see is I've got a couple of greens here, which are fairly small-sized requirements. I've got some larger ones, which we may want to kind of split down into less. And we've got some that ScopeMaster simply doesn't know what to do about it. So let me take you through a very, very simple one, the very first one. And what you can see is here, it's brought through the user story saying, as a visitor, I want to add my address. If I hover over it, you can see it's picked up that as a noun, and it knows that's a noun of type user. It's picked up that as the verb, so it knows what it's doing. And it's picked up that as another noun in terms of the object that's been affected. And by doing that, it's now interpreted it to say, hey, the functional step is you want to add a delivery address, and that relates to the entry, exit, read, and write functions that Colin talked about. It also shows you that that's happening on the user of type visitor, and it's affecting the object delivery address. If you look at the quality of this one, you can see the quality is pretty good. It is, however, suggesting a few things which could make it even better. And it's suggesting that there's potential stuff that's missing, which we'll cover a little bit later. Like Colin says, is it automatically creates the test cases for you, both positive and negative, and really does a lot of the heavy lifting that BAs might have to do from an administrative perspective, at the touch of a button. And then finally, what it does is it creates the relationships between user stories and objects, and there you can see everything that's related to this user story. So that's, in essence, a very, very simple walkthrough of it. What I'm able to do is I'm able to go and look at these two that are bad, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and fix them and make them slightly better. So first things first, you can have a look at this one. If I look at this one as a visitor, I want to see my order in my cart. That seems reasonably good enough. But if I look at the quality is suggesting, hey, that verb's a little bit ambiguous. See could mean many, many different things. So if I click on that, it'll just help me, and it says, hey, these are the types of things that you might want to do. So if I want to see it, I would think I want to read it. And what do I actually want to do? Well, I maybe want to check, or I maybe want to preview it. Okay, so if I just simply go back into my user story and change that C to preview, that's now no longer an ambiguous verb, and hopefully that should fix up the user story and drive better quality. You can see that that's now been sized. It wasn't sized before, and I'm able to get rid of that ambiguity, that simple ambiguity that may kind of push a developer in the wrong direction. Here's another example. This one is probably done by a business analyst who's fairly new on the job, maybe doesn't know user stories. And what you can see is they've put in everything around the solution. They've put in that they want to use Java and a whole lot of different things that are really not good practices around user stories. So if you look there from a quality perspective, it's actually suggesting you don't put coding advice in. It doesn't really see the objects. It can't really see what's going on. The verb count, there's too many of them, so we're not quite sure exactly what's going on. So we need to go and fix this. And if you read this, it really looks like the person really just wants to search by kind of a search item. So if I were to change that to say, as a visitor, I want to search item. Sorry, and I can't spell. And I now rerun that again. What it's going to do is it's going to suggest my functions, which is showing me the correct thing. It's increased the quality. I've obviously got the history, so I can toggle backwards and forth and actually use this as a training intervention with my BA to say, hey, don't write it like that, write it like this. And, you can show the different scenarios. It's updated the tests and it's updated the related stories. So I've gone away and I've fixed and clarified a number of user stories. Now, if you have a couple of hundred in here, it really focuses the minds on the ones that need attention. Next thing that ScopeMaster does and does really well is it categorizes your users. So what you can see by running it through ScopeMaster, it's picked up these as potential users and these as potential objects. And what we often find is organizations lack a data dictionary. So this is your data dictionary of commonly used terms. So I can go in and say visitor. I'm happy that that's a real user, and I may give it a description. I may even say administrator, and I'm happy with that. I can also see where these things occur in that. But what I'm doing here is I'm confirming common language. Now, you may have a certain piece of code where you may have client, consumer, and customer. They all might mean the same thing, and it may be very confusing for the developer. So again, yeah, it's just that central repository data dictionary. And exactly the same thing from an objects perspective. I'm going to go and just validate that the address is correct, or the delivery address is correct, and maybe the address is correct there. And by validating and confirming these things, what I'm able to do is I'm able to see my my quality of my requirements improve as I go and as I start to clarify and confirm those things. The next thing that's key is we find that in a lot of instances, it's not necessarily the user stories that are problematic. It's missing user stories. So if you have a look at this, you can see here against the object address or delivery address, if we take a simple CRUD, which stands for create, read, update, and delete, you can see of the user stories that we've got, the address, we've only got something here, a user story that reads the address. We've got nothing that creates it and nothing that updates it. So what we do here to make sure that we've covered everything and we haven't missed a user story or a requirement is we might say, okay, I'm okay with that. I'm pretty happy that that thing's missing because you know what, it's covered somewhere else or it's existing in the system and I don't have to touch it. But it's a conscious decision to decide to exclude that. But on this particular one, I might say, oh, that's an interesting thing. I may actually want to be able to update my address. So I want to add a user story. And instead of me doing a brand new user story, all I do is I take the syntax and I put in my benefit and I hit the save button and it's going to add that user story for me. So what I would do over time is I would just make sure that I tick all these boxes and make sure that I've covered everything and I've consciously decided whether to cover anything or not. What you'll also find is if I go back to my user stories now, there's that user story that I've just created. And if I look at the quality, there are certain objects that are now confirmed, which is going to increase that score and increase the quality around your user stories. The final thing that I'm going to take you through is a couple of the views. And so what you can see here is I can have a tabular view, which is giving me pretty much the same stuff. But this is pretty useful in terms of running through my user requirements, looking at my users, my functional intent, my quality, and my size. I can also go and look at that from a user and objects perspective, which is what I've taken you through before, which is really that common data dictionary around both users and objects. You can also go through the quality stuff, which I've talked about a few minutes ago. The other thing that the quality stuff does is it looks for duplicates. So you may have multiple stories here that are doing exactly the same thing, in which case you'd probably want to remove one of those duplicate user stories. Next thing that it does is you would have seen that the test cases are produced per user story. All that I've now done is I've gone to the view and looked at all my test cases. So this has got every single user story that's in there with all the test cases. And I can simply download this to Excel. And if I open that up, what you'll see is in a couple of seconds, that comes through. Now, again, this does a lot of heavy lifting that BAs might otherwise have to do. That's really manual and labor intensive, but this does it for you at the touch of a button, and it allows you to go and leverage these test cases, as required. Just jumping back to that, the next thing that we've got is we've got a full report. This is really useful as you start to finalize your projects. This gives you a full view in terms of we've got 13 requirements. It's 52 cosmic function points. We've got 5 users, 27 objects. We've got 0 ambiguous now. We've got 49 missing and 2 duplicates. If we had obviously cleared that that quality section out, we would have improved that. And then each and every user story with all the detail and the suggested quality changes or advice, around getting that to be more specific. Next thing that we've got is we've got the ability to kind of label throughout the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go and add a label here. And let's say I want to add a label about sprint 1. And I want to apply that to this particular user story, maybe this one here, sprint 1. And let's just do one more. Let's maybe go and add this to sprint 2. Just make it a little bit clearer. All right. So what I'm able to do now is I'm able to see my user stories per label. And so what I can see now is I can see quite nicely which falls into which sprint. Now I could use this for epics. I could use this for business object or outcomes and stuff like that. I can use it for anything that I want to in terms of grouping and classifying these things. Now, where this is particularly relevant, if I know, for example, that my velocity, I can do 10 cosmic function points in a sprint, what I can start to do is I can start to fill this up with user stories that kind of reach that constraint. So it really helps a lot in sprint planning and understanding what scope you can deliver as part of that particular sprint. Next one that you'll see is the use cases. Like Colin says, this allows you to kind of have some real informative conversations around what the system is doing. So what I'm able to do here is I'm able to say, okay, give me everything that affects delivery address. I might close that out. Give me everything that affects my user or my visitor. And what you can see is you can start to see how the system fits together and comes together. I'll just make that a little bit bigger, just in case you can't see. But that really starts to allow you to have, those discussions around what the system's actually doing. If I go to the next view, functions, this is really just giving me a functional view around what's happening to your objects. And it's giving me the object, the functional step, and the user stories that are contributing to that. If I go to the next one, this is really just a summary view of your project. It really just gives me a summary view as to what it's about. It's giving me my functional requirements, my requirements types, because it can cover both functional and non-functional type of requirements. It's giving me my quality, and it's tracking over time as my requirements improve. So this is particularly valuable for kind of managing scope creep and understanding how your requirements quality is improved, as well as how your project is potentially increased in size. So as I start to run ScopeMaster over a period of time, so it'll start to draw these trends for me, and so I can start to manage the size of my project, the functional size, and number of requirements that have come through. If I look at class and method, it's just a slightly different view of the same stuff. And finally, we've just got 2 views on estimates. So like Colin says, it does cosmic function point sizing automatically for you. So you can see there. It converts it based on some rule of thumbs to lines of code. So if you're interested in that, it does defect projections based on, again, industry standards. It gives you an indicative view of development cost, an indicative view of duration, and the tests that are likely to be created out of this. It is very much a rule of thumb estimate. And so while this is really, really valuable in terms of the cosmic function points, if you wanted to go to more elaborate estimates, we would suggest you consider something more elaborate like SEER parametric estimation model to make this estimate really come alive and be specific to your environment. And then finally, it gives us functional sizing based on IFPUG, and it gives us the ranges in terms of that. The one feature that I really like is the ability to search. So let's just say we want to have a look at address. I can search the system for address, and it's going to give me everywhere where address exists in those user stories. Where it really, really comes together is if I want to do that across everything I have in my system. So if I click that button, it's now not doing it on that particular project, it's doing it across the board, which can be massively valuable. If you think about the Protection of Personal Information Act and stuff like that, finding out which user stories contribute to that and are impacted by that is invaluable. And I can start to slice and dice based on that. I think that is about it. So hopefully I haven't missed anything. I created the CSV file, I imported to ScopeMaster, I mapped the fields, ran the analysis, assessed them. I did some minor refinements, and I took you through the reports and that. And I must be honest, ScopeMaster is incredibly easy for you guys to run, or for anyone to adopt and pick up. The other thing just to note is, like I said, ScopeMaster does have bidirectional integration with Jira Cloud, Pivotal Tracker, and Azure DevOps. You're also able to bring in things via REST API or something as simple as a CSV upload. So there are many variations around what you can do to drive that. Any questions? Maybe what I'll do is let me just jump to the next slide, and then we'll take Q&A. So let me just go back to the slide presentation. So we're really delighted to offer you guys a very exclusive offer in terms of anyone that's attended today. And the offer is a 30-day trial license for ScopeMaster. It's valued at 950 Aussie dollars. We're obviously limiting this to about 100 user stories, which is typically what a BA would do in a month, subject to obviously the acceptance and ScopeMaster end user terms and conditions. And we, from an Avec perspective, will provide local support if required. For you guys to take up this offer, all you have to do is complete a 1-minute survey. It's probably less than a minute. It's about 4 or 5 questions, and you will receive an activation email that is valid for 30 days. That's it. Any questions? I'll ask maybe Colin and Nathan to join us, and then we'll take questions from you guys based on the chat list. Colin, I hope I did that justice.
Yeah, that was great. That was great. Better than I do. So yeah, super job of demonstrating it, and really quick too. Just one question that occurred to me as I was seeing your presentation at the end there is, how do people get access to the I don't think you mentioned it. How do people get access to the questionnaire so that they can?
Yeah, so immediately after the session, an email will get sent to you with a short survey. At the end of the survey, you will see the URL that will take you directly into ScopeMaster. You put in your details, you sign up, and you'll have access for a 30-day period.
Great, thanks.
Okay, we're just going to have a look at the different questions. So let's just talk about pricing. So if you look at pricing, ScopeMaster is priced based on user stories. So you would buy a batch of user stories, and it ranges anything from $7 per user story down to $5 per user story, obviously dependent on volume. And the way it works is every time you run a user story, a new user story, that equates to 1 credit, okay, essentially between $5 and $7. But once you've run it that one time, any changes or any amendments to that for a 30-day period are free of charge. So what you just saw now, where I did 12 user stories, that would cost you about $60, and you could then continue to try and refine that over time, and it wouldn't cost you anything more than the $60 that you had covered through the 12 requirements. Anything you want to add, Colin, to that?
No, that's absolutely fine. It's really, there's the value when you think about the value you get. So ScopeMaster will typically find 1 to 2 defects per user story. Normally that would cost $100 or $200 each to find and fix, and you're getting that for about $5. So it's terrific. It's a terrific value. And it's all about shift left testing, really. You think about it as just even ignoring the sizing aspect. The more quality work you do early, the more you will save on your project. So you end up getting faster, better, cheaper which is what most executives are looking for. They want shorter schedules, they want better quality, and they want to do it for less money or less effort. And by driving this really thorough analysis of your requirements, that's what you end up being able to achieve.
Great. There are a few more questions coming through. So, Colin, I don't know if you want to maybe just address one or two of those. I'm just trying to...
Yeah. I think I've tackled many of them as we've gone along. Can it be used with SAFe? Yeah, absolutely. SAFe as a methodology is crying out for reliable measurement, and cosmic function points is really what it needs. And ScopeMaster is a extremely fast way of getting there, is very practical. So we've got So
Colin, a question in about AI reality. It's just coming.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. The AI is really about natural language processing, and that is all it is. Well, there are a number of other algorithms and things going on underneath there, but there is no other specific machine learning than natural language processing. And as a consequence of that, you don't have to teach the tool about your specific syntax or your specific terminology for your business. And there are a few techniques, we didn't cover them today, about using brackets and of different sorts in order to ensure that ScopeMaster interprets your terminology exactly as you want it to be interpreted. But yeah, so that's the beauty of it. Because it doesn't need pre-training, it doesn't use machine learning as so many tools do. You can use it straight out of the box. Just import your requirements and go.
Great. Any more questions from anyone? I'm just looking at the top of the chat box. So if any questions, shout out.
So there's one here from Joshua. How does it handle the 20% of backlog items that are not written as user stories? You can categorize your story as a non-functional one, and so you can keep all your stories together, but the non-functional ones, or the project tasks, yeah, there you go. There we are, non-functional task or constraint. So those are usually the other types of story you might have.
And just that previous tip that Colin talked about, obviously it parses in based on the English language. If it's not getting it right and not picking up a user, there's ways you can force it by simple curly brackets. So if you just read here quickly, you can actually force it to kind of pick that up as a user or an object, or actually exclude the whole thing from your user story. So real flexibility. And like I said, it probably gets about 99% or 95% of the stuff right. It does require some tweaking and changing where it can't pick up or assess users or objects that may be foreign to kind of the system.
Yihan asks us about the data dictionary and about sharing it across projects. Yes, the data dictionary is definitely something that is on our roadmap to invest more time and intelligence into, so that we can stimulate more reuse. Because reuse of the data dictionary is really what can help you across an enterprise. So for enterprise architects in particular.
And then sorry, carry on.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Arvinder's just asked the question, can you give us a view of the companies that are using it? So in Australia, no companies are using it yet. This is the first. So we kind of brought this to you first. We are having a couple of discussions with a number of clients who are very interested in it. But Colin can maybe just share a little bit, or what he can share internationally around some of the clients that are using it.
Yes, unfortunately, nearly everybody requires us to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and because they treat their software requirements as commercially advantageous or commercially sensitive as you would code, which is really frustrating from a reference point of view. So we've got an e-commerce company in the States using it on theirs. We've got a university in Dayton, Ohio, who's using it, and they're generating extra extra work. There's a development team out there developing extra work. We've used it ourselves on a number of defense projects, but of course I can't tell you about those. And we've had a very large, global consulting company in the UK use it on some finance work that they've done. And they were very excited, even with a highly cohesive team working on a steady project. They were still able to drive 5% effort reduction and 5 to 6% schedule shortening from using it. So that was sort of a worst case, was that those kinds of benefits. And we're hoping that one of our biggest clients will be coming from Italy, who we will be able to talk about. But unfortunately, they are also subject to NDA. So I'm sorry, we can't.
And just out of interest, the one interesting thing is they do it in different languages. I mean, that's not applicable to the Australian market, but similar sort of, idea and similar sort of process from different languages. The one thing I'll also just mention, and sorry, I failed to mention, it is an app that's available in the Atlassian store. So as an add-on to Jira. So it is available through the App Store, through the Atlassian App Store. It doesn't quite have as much functionality as it does based on this version, but it is certainly catching at a rapid rate or not. So again, you can check that out if you're interested. Any more questions? We're nearing the end of this, so we've got about 2 minutes to go. More than happy to take a few more questions if you have any. For those of you who are dropping off, thank you for your time and really appreciate it. If you have any queries or you want any more information on that, please reach out to Nathan or myself or email us at info@avecglobal.com. And like I said, I encourage you guys all to sign up to the free offer, have a go, push some user stories through it, take that 1 minute survey, and we think you'll benefit hugely from it. Got a few more questions coming in. Colin? So we've got a question, is ScopeMaster platform and data hosted in Australia? Colin, no, it's not. It's hosted in the States.
That's right. It is hosted. That is right. It's hosted in the USA, and if we have sufficient demand, we will look to host it in Australia as well.
Okay. And the next one, does ScopeMaster have a workflow management tool for requirements review and approval? No. So the simple answer is no. Obviously it tracks trends over time, but it certainly doesn't do any workflow in terms of approval and that. But I see Colin nodding his head. Maybe that's something for some future functionality going forward. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, Colin.
We take the view that ScopeMaster is really good at analyzing stories and driving as much value from that as possible. We don't want to tread on the toes of tools that are out there that do their jobs really well. And if you're a heavy user of Jira or Azure DevOps, and that has the right kind of approval process in it, we wouldn't really be trying to compete with them. We'd much rather work alongside them or feed into them or integrate with them with those other tools. So that's generally, the way we approach it. Let's work alongside the other tools.
So we've got a few comments. Thanks for the positive feedback, everyone. I think we've got another question here. Where are the system developers for ScopeMaster located?
In the UK.
Just some thanks coming through. Fantastic presentation. So can't wait to give it a trial. That's great, Eddie. I look forward to that. Awesome. So look, we'll leave this open for a few more minutes. It has gone 12:30, so really appreciate your time and thank you very much. Like I said, we'll leave it open until 12:35 if there are any last questions to come through. Okay, I'm just seeing thanks coming through, so I think probably best for us to just call it. And if there are any queries, please contact us on that email address, info@avecglobal.com. Thank you very much for your time and your participation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you. Speak to you all soon.